Hello, listeners. I'm Timstradamus, and it's Wednesday. And joining me, as always, is my talented and beautiful co-hostess, Voyse.
Good morning, Timstradamus, and welcome all listeners to Wednesday, where when people refer to back in the day, it was Wednesday. Just a little fun fact for you.
Really? Seriously?
I'm not sure.
Am I overthinking that?
I think you're overthinking it.
Okay.
Hold on. Now I'm actually...
I like learning facts. Voyse and I enjoy reading and talking about stories from the internet that are interesting, funny, and dramatic. Because of our love of stories, we've come together and created this channel to share with you those experiences.
And hopefully give you some food for thought.
Well, why don't we get right into the stories while enjoying my morning kebab. And what did you make for me today?
Mango passion fruit. I actually added a little bit of rose hips, some orange peel, and lemongrass.
Oh, this is a 5 out of 5. Oh, my Lanta. That's fantastic. It's got my jaw tingling.
Is it the passion fruit?
This is going to be a good Wednesday.
All right. Well, for any listeners wanting to follow along, all story links are in the description below. For our first story, it's tagged as not safe for work.
Oh.
Am I the a-hole for not wanting to name my daughter something that's a rude word in my language? Slightly NSFW, but not really. I, 30 female, and my husband, 37 male, are expecting our first child. We've just found out that it's going to be a girl, and so we've started discussing potential names. My husband and I are from different countries with different languages. We both speak each other's languages, and we live in my husband's country. When we found out we were having a girl, my husband said he'd like for us to name her after his grandmother, who passed away recently, and who he was extremely close to. I think this is very, very sweet idea. And I would have no problem with it were it not for the fact that, to put it bluntly, her name in my language means female genitalia. In his country, that association doesn't exist at all. It's just a pretty name. And he feels that because we live in his country, there's no issue with our daughter being called that. On the other hand, I'm extremely, extremely reluctant to call her it, knowing what it means in my country. It'll be embarrassing for her to introduce herself with that name when we visit. And if we ever move back, we're not planning to, but you never know. And she had to attend school there, she'd definitely be bullied for it. We've argued about it a bit, and neither of us want to back down. I suggested we use it as a middle name, but he really wants to honor his grandmother by using it as a first name. I suggested we change the name slightly to make it a name that exists in my country, while still being very similar to his grandmother's name, but he thinks that's not the same. Eventually, my husband accused me of being embarrassed by his culture, which isn't true. I'm in love with his culture, and I think the name is very pretty. It's just that I know our daughter will visit my country too, and she'll have such a hard time there with that name. Am I being the a-hole to insist we use it as a middle name or change it slightly? Edit, the name is Fanny. Sorry, I don't know why I didn't include it in originally.
Let's go on a journey to start Wednesday off. What an interesting story you've picked. All right, so OP sounds like a good partner because she's giving alternative compromises to try to make it work. She didn't outright say no like her partner's doing to her, though. It's all or nothing for him, and that kind of sucks. I understand that he's trying to, in this sense, honor his grandmother, because apparently they had a really nice relationship, and that's great. They're from two different countries. They speak each other's language. How awesome is that? That's really cool. I like this story. They're living in his home country, and this is where the story takes a weird, turn. They say, okay, so she does tell us the name. It's Fanny.
Correct.
Fanny. Okay. And in her culture, that means female genitalia. That's all she'd say it means. And in his, it just means the name.
It's just a pretty name. And in our language, what does that mean?
Your butt.
Right.
So I gotta say, just based off the fact that he's unwilling to compromise even a little bit to make it work for both of them, because she's right. Her daughter is going to get older, and she also might want to travel around or go see where her mother's from, where her roots are, because she's going to have her father's roots. She said she loves his culture. How amazing is that you met someone who also happens to speak your language from another country, but also loves your background and your culture? How fantastic is that?
I think it's amazing.
So she sounds like a gem. I gotta say, I believe that the OP is not the a-hole in this situation. I think she's looking at it very rationally, and I'm shocked that he wouldn't take into account what that name means somewhere else. I understand that he's like, it doesn't matter because we live here, but it kind of does matter.
Well, the consensus is not the a-hole. In fact, we have a small little edit with a tiny update regarding some slight details.
Okay.
They said, "Thank you for all your comments. It's good to know I'm not just being Anglo-centric/overly sensitive. I'll raise it again with a few of these comments and see if we can compromise on using it as a middle name. Or using Francis, which I absolutely love. I think he's just coming from a place of pain from losing his grandma, and it's making him more defensive about it than he normally be."
Well, she would know her husband best. Hopefully they can come to a compromise on it.
I think regarding kids and their names, it should be something that both parents love and agree on.
Gotta have it.
So all of this had the commenters in a tizzy concerning certain names, especially when it comes to their area, regions around the world. And someone actually said that they had a friend whose surname used to be Klutz. His kids changed all of their names to their mother's maiden name. On top of that, in Denmark, there's a certain name that when I read it, it looks like sloth. However, it's actually pronounced slut.
Oh.
Oh, yes.
Well, maybe not that name then.
And then on top of it, there's apparently a Danish surname. It's called Dick. And it's actually from a wonderful city there called Middelfart.
I mean, that's the cool thing about language. And they're pointing it all out here is that name or that word can mean something entirely different in another place. But it sounds funny to me, but I'm certain that it's not that funny to them. You know what I mean?
Oh, it's probably a very serious name.
Yeah.
We're not going to get into the rest of the names on here, but in other languages, quite vulgar things for the English language is actually quite common over there and is not seen for the vulgarities that the English language has it tagged out to be.
That's
I found it very interesting.
Yeah, seriously.
If you want to actually read more of the funny names and the history on some of these names, definitely look in the comment section of this post. Now, I'm getting a little risky, so I've decided to go ahead and add another not safe for work story.
Tantalizing.
For our next story. Am I the a-hole for confronting my roommate about her perv boyfriend? I'm a 20-year-old female college student, and I live with my roommate, who I'll call Emma. Emma has been dating this guy, who I'll call Mark, for a few months now, and I've always been supportive of their relationship. However, things changed when I started noticing that Mark was always over at our apartment, and he was starting to become a little too comfortable. He would eat our food, use our things without asking, and he would even stay over when Emma wasn't there. It got to the point that he would get drunk and slyly flirt/say sexual things to me while she was gone. One day, I decided to confront Emma about it and told her that I didn't feel comfortable with Mark always being over, being creepy, and using our things without asking. Emma got really defensive and said that I was overreacting and that Mark was just being friendly. I didn't want to cause any drama, so I dropped the subject. However, the situation only got worse, and Mark started to become more and more invasive. Finally, I decided to confront Emma again, and this time I told her that I thought Mark was taking advantage of us and that he needed to respect our boundaries. Emma got really angry and accused me of being jealous of her relationship. She said that I was being a terrible friend and that I should just mind my own business. Now, I'm starting to wonder if I was the a-hole for confronting Emma about her boyfriend. Did I overstep my boundaries? Should I just let it go and try to tolerate Mark's behavior?
Well, this is definitely a oh my Lanta moment because you should never tolerate this. I would be very careful around this type of situation. You've brought it up to your roommate that her boyfriend is a skeeve. Her response to you is that you're jealous. It sounds like you need to go find yourself a new roommate because I don't believe she's going to see it any other way until something catastrophic happens. It sounds like this guy doesn't believe in boundaries. If he's coming in, because he doesn't live there, right? This is just a boyfriend who happens to be crashing over there a lot more often than he should.
Correct. He's only technically been together with his girlfriend for a few months.
That is way too soon. If he's not paying any rent, if he's using your guys' things, you're saying he's using things, he's eating food that it doesn't belong to him. So he obviously doesn't understand roommate etiquette to begin with. So he's not good at boundaries. That's not a healthy person to be around until you can establish that they understand what boundaries are. If they're willing to push past yours, they have no respect for you. So identify those people. Boundaries are important.
I agree with that.
I hope that Redditors gave her good advice because she is so young don't tolerate this at any age. You're definitely not the a-hole. I would, at this point, go ahead and cut losses, get myself out of that living situation, find someplace else to live that's safe, because that's not tolerable. She doesn't respect you nor her boyfriend until something bad happens. Don't live your life like that.
Well, the consensus is that she's not the a-hole. In fact, there was such an overwhelming amount of people that said that is a situation you need to get away from right now. There's clearly no control from your roommate on that relationship and letting him know to not do it. In fact, there was some "you're the a-holes" that I don't agree with, saying that she was the a-hole for confronting Emma rather than Mark.
Absolutely not.
I think that is wrong, because the only reason why Mark is there is because of the relationship with Emma.
Yep.
There was, in fact, a few people that said that they can't understand why it is that people were saying and screaming that he's going to sexually assault her, because there's no evidence to suggest that, aside from our poster saying that he makes sure that he's alone with her,
Before
has
he
gotten
starts doing
drunk,
those things.
and then has talked to her and tried to slyly flirt and sexualize stuff with her. I think that's uncalled for, and those people are exactly like Mark.
Yep. They don't know what boundaries are either. If that's how you're speaking to people in a chat, then you clearly don't understand how boundaries work. And that's disgusting.
Don't get me wrong. As I said, the majority of Reddit commenters were not the a-hole. These are just a few that when I ran across them, it actually really irked me that they have no filter and understanding that their viewpoints are disgusting, and rather than taking the information that all the other commenters
Learning
were providing, I hope that they are trolls.
They might be, hopefully. But I hope that ROP listened to people and got the hell out of that situation, because that won't get better. And yes, don't sit there and wait for a catastrophe to happen.
I also agree. Well, let's go ahead and leave this situation behind. And let's go to our next story. And we're back at McDonald's for our next story. Am I the a-hole for leaving dinner to get my son McDonald's even though food was served? A friend of my wife's invited my family. My wife, 29 female, our son, 5 male, and I, 26 male, over for dinner with him, 30 male, and his daughter, 5 female. As long as we've known him, this friend has kept to a very strict diet, which has almost always led to us eating over at his place. But he is an excellent cook, so I've never minded. We have not, however, seen him since both of our children were infants. For dinner, we were served salmon with quinoa and arugula. My son is mild for a 5-year-old. He throws tantrums very rarely and is the opposite of a picky eater, but I could tell from how he was acting that he was not vibing with this meal. He was picking at his plate, shuffling food, and while he did try the salmon, he didn't seem to like it. I asked him if he was happy with his dinner, and he said no, he wasn't. I basically said, kids, right? And asked if there was anything else for my son to eat. My wife's friend said that his daughter just eats whatever he makes, so he doesn't keep kid food around the house. My wife said it was fine, our son would be fine. While he is a mild kid, he definitely gets hangry, and this was the beginning of our night, so we anticipated being there for an additional hour or two. I said that our son needed to eat so he'd have energy to play and apologized, saying I'd be gone for just a few minutes, picking something up for our kid. My wife's friend seemed irked and said he'd try and keep my plate warm. I was gone for about 30 minutes, came back with a Happy Meal, ordered extra fries in case his daughter wanted any, which she was not allowed to have. By the time I was back, dinner was winding down. My son ate his meal, we had dessert, and he went off to play with his friend. It was definitely a hiccup in the night, but things went fine. We had a good time, but my wife was definitely cold with me. When we got home, 3 hours after dinner, she told me that I was an ass at dinner for no reason. I pointed out that if I hadn't gotten our son dinner, he would have been a monster the entire way home, to which she replied that we would have left earlier. I said I was just looking to solve the problem as it happened, and that if her friend had been more accommodating, we wouldn't have been in the situation in the first place. She got offended on his behalf, and we decided to just go to bed because we clearly were not getting anywhere. It's been 2 days since. Things are still stilted between us, and I'm not sure where I went wrong. Am I the a-hole for leaving dinner to get my son food, even though dinner was served?
Another interesting story. Okay, so let's see if we understand all the facts. OP is husband. We're seeing it through his eyes.
Correct.
They are going to a dinner hosted by the wife's friend. Sounds like he's a good cook. So upon going to the dinner, because they both have 5-year-olds, and they say it, they haven't seen each other or had any type of hangouts since their kids were toddlers.
Correct.
So they get to the dinner. I guess they didn't really talk about what was being served at dinner, because if they had, they probably would have gotten something for their son earlier or had something prepared for the son. You should always do that, by the way. If you get invited to anything, please understand what the menu entails so you can avoid these type of things for everyone.
I agree.
That's just a really good way of handling business.
Yes.
Because, you have to watch out for allergies and the whole litany of things that come up. Understand what you're eating first, so that way you avoid snafus like this.
Especially since Timstradamus doesn't like seafood.
I hate it. I hate it with a passion.
Wow, this was not your dinner then.
I agree with the child. So they're having dinner. He says it. His son isn't really a picky eater. Normally he'll eat what's on there. But in his words, his son wasn't vibing with the salmon. I can understand that. Not sure if a whole lot of 5-year-olds, if they're not exposed to that type of food on the plate, not really liking it. He says it though. The kid tries. Now they ask OP's wife's friend if there are other things he could eat. And his response to that was very petty. Well, our daughter eats what I put on the plate. We don't have kid food. What? That's a really weird retort to a simple question.
Even just making something like some rice for the kid to eat would have been something.
Like, that's where it already starts off on a very aggressive foot. It's almost like the friend was viewing it as the kid says the food sucks, so he's hurt by it. That's my interpretation of how his response is going.
I could see that.
Which you should not take with a child, because they're kids. They're 5. Just because your 5-year-old is accustomed to eating this food doesn't mean all 5-year-olds on the planet are. But he proceeds to do what I think a lot of parents would do in that moment. Make sure that their kid, a 5-year-old, is also eating when they're supposed to. It's different for kids. They've got to be on track. And a 5-year-old, if they're eating too late, they're not sleeping. I think he did what most parents would do in that situation. Adjust to what hand he's been dealt. He says it took him 30 minutes. That sucks. Because I can only imagine eating at the table, especially when it's your wife's friend that you're at. I'm certain the words that were passed between people were not kind. But he was just being a good dad, in my opinion. He was going and getting food for his kid, so that way, in his words, the kid can have a meal and energy to go play with his friend. Is that really an issue? I don't see it as one. Now, again, it wasn't 30 minutes in the middle of dinner, so when he's getting there, they're obviously probably wrapping it up. I am certain that his meal was cold. Salmon is one of those, most fish is. I may dislike it, but when I cook it for Voyse,
it's so good when he cooks it.
You've got to eat it warm. It's not one of those things that you let get cold. So good for him for looking out for his son regardless of what the meal turned out to be. I don't like the pettiness that's in here, because I would be interested into understanding why she felt that way towards you. If your kid's hungry and it's dinner time, but there's nothing to eat because there's no children food around in the friend's viewpoint, then you go out and you go get food. I don't think you're the a-hole in this situation, OP.
Well, let me give you what moderators say, what I see a lot of people say, and then I'll give you what I say.
Oh, is this one of those?
Oh, yes.
Oh, interesting.
So let me break it out.
Okay.
So moderators tagged it as you're the a-hole.
Is it because he left the dinner?
Correct. And it's in the middle of dinner.
30 minutes. Okay. They're eating. Okay.
Now, let me go ahead and provide you what I see the consensus is. The consensus appears to be everyone sucks here. It was the fact that he left in the middle of everyone eating, almost to placate to a 5-year-old, rather than teaching him to be patient and we'll go ahead and we'll deal with it after dinner, right? He claims that they had dessert after they came back. He could have had dessert. It could have held him over while he went to go get some food for his son. Okay. Rather than leaving right smack dab in the middle of dinner. Now, the other side says the reason why everyone sucks here is, as a host, you should be more accommodating. And yeah, it kind of felt like he took it as a slight on his cooking, rather than understanding that this was a child, that seafood just wasn't for him.
You know why I had the response I did? Because in that moment, if someone told me at the table that they don't have children food, I would take that as a slight against my child and me.
Oh, yes.
And then I would go, I'm going to go get some food. I'll be right back. Because the thing is, if this isn't my friend and I'm here because of my wife,
which would be me.
Yes. I would see that as being very combative, and I'd go out of my way to make sure that my kid eats too.
But I would never let it get to that. And
sure.
see,
But that's our relationship. That's not theirs.
That's the other part. So they feel as if the host was not being a very good host at all. Now, for me, let me go ahead and give you my viewpoints. This is a 5-year-old, and seafood for a lot of people is a hit and miss. Sure. Aside from that, you'll also have to worry about seafood allergies. And at that age, those allergies can actually pop up. I have my little brother, and we found out when he was 4 years old, when he had one peanut, that he was allergic to nuts. And it happened fairly quickly. If this child was trying seafood for the first time, one, you don't know if somebody has an allergy. You can't assume that a child that's trying something for the first time might not have an allergy. Honestly, it's more common to have peanut and seafood allergies nowadays than it ever has been.
Interesting.
Now, the other part of me says, I can understand he got up in the middle of everybody eating and he left. And yes, I would consider that rude. But as a host, you would find a way to compromise to make everybody in the house that you're trying to serve food happy. Now, here's another thing that I don't think was brought up nearly half as much as it should have been. The wife.
Oh yeah, she's a big part of this.
You're saying that your son should have sat there, only ate dessert while everybody else had a good meal as a 5-year-old. And for 3 hours while the adults talked and he played, should have just dealt with it.
And then get something on the way home, at whatever hour they're at. Because this is a dinner.
Correct.
We'll say they're eating at like 6 or 7.
And
that's still
3 hours after that dinner.
That's still 9, 10.
So for me, when she says as her argument that they could have left an hour earlier, I think that is very irresponsible to a child. It really irked me. I think for me, I commend the father for trying to take action. I understand when it comes to placating to children, when it comes to small things. We're not talking about a small thing. We're talking about an entire meal. But I think this comes around to, as adults, we can learn to understand that, to
Sure.
wait, to eat what you can. As a host, they should understand this is a child. These are adults. And there was no compromise made between 3 adults to make sure that a 5-year-old properly ate a meal at a good time.
I can agree with that. I can definitely understand the sentiment about how he shouldn't have left for 30 minutes to go get a meal. I get back on what I said before. I feel like he only had that response to it because the response he got back from the friend was very rude. And I think at that point, it would have ruffled my feathers too. And I'm like, well, I tell you what, I'll be back. Enjoy your nasty salmon. I'm going to go get my kid a Happy Meal.
Now, some people got kind of up in arms regarding this. And let me just bring up some of those points because I like getting up in arms too. So first things first, somebody accused the OP of trying to duck out and get McDonald's for himself.
That's what I just said.
Yeah. However, he actually refutes that. He said only his son got a meal. He came back and he had a salmon along with his son eating a Happy Meal. And then some commenters actually try to come back and say, you tried to feed somebody else's kid junk food. And he said, no, I didn't. I got them something just in case so that they wouldn't feel excluded.
Yeah, that's a good person.
The moment that he said no, that was it. I think a lot of people try to combat the rudeness of leaving in the middle of a meal and trying to find more issues with the poster. Personally, I find nothing at fault with what he did, aside from he left in the middle of the meal. He could have waited till after he was done eating,
Sure.
said, the meal is great, I'll be right back to get my son something. Or
I just don't know how I would sit that at the table after hearing his response to me about how we don't have child.
that's the whole thing.
That's where I don't hear anyone's side, because at that dinner table, if I'm sitting there across from someone and they go, well, it sucks, we don't have children food here. I'm an understanding person, and I do try, especially when it comes to social norms and dinner etiquette and all of those things. But the second you cross I guess it would depend on how he went about it, because if he does come off and say just like that callousness, it would also depend on his tone. Well, then I would be hearing him go, in that tone, my child is better than yours and has more refined taste than yours. You're a bad parent for him not having those tastes. That would be the end of it for me. Like I said, suck on your salmon. I'm going to go get McDonald's.
I think this is where it comes down to, as people shouldn't weaponize their tastes against other people.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that can't stand certain kinds of food. You're trying to have a 5-year-old conform to your tastes when that's not how most 5-year-olds eat. Your daughter sits there as a 5-year-old eating the salmon because that's what you put in front of her. Because if she doesn't, she gets no food. But that's just how she's had to grow up. Do I consider that mean? Not necessarily, not if she's used to it, but for a child that's not, and for a lot of people that don't like certain foods, they shouldn't have that forced down their throats.
I think a lot of people might be looking at it from the it's on your plate, eat it mentality.
I don't think that's a good mentality
Not
either.
with kids.
That leads to a lot of overeating. That leads to a lot of unhealthy choices. But I digress, and I will go ahead and turn off preacher mode.
And that was our TED Talk. It's very interesting. I look forward to hearing the comments about this because if they're split, we love hearing people's opinions on things. So what are yours? Are they the a-hole? Are they not?
Do you think everyone sucks here or no a-holes here?
I look forward to it.
Well, let's get away from that dinner. I might have enjoyed that salmon, but Timstradamus wouldn't.
I like McDonald's with a kid.
And let's go to our next story. Am I the a-hole for grounding my daughter after she called me a liar? My husband, male 47, and I, female 40, are getting divorced. We have 3 kids together, Emily, female 17, a male 15, and a male 4. When my husband and I met, we both were married to other people. He was my ex's husband's coworker, and we met in one of their company parties. We hit it off, and we had an affair before we got divorced to start dating. Emily was born shortly after we got divorced. We never felt like we should tell all of this to our kids when they were growing up, mainly because they were too young. Neither him or I had kids with our exes, so we just throw away our wedding photos and pretended neither of those marriages happened. When/if the kids asked how we met, we told them it was through common friends. Well, now that we're getting divorced, Emily has picked her dad's side. I can't really stop her from seeing him whenever she wants because our custody agreement is not over yet. So she often goes to his house after school/spends the weekends with him. He told her the truth. He's trying to get her to believe that I'm wrong in all of this, although all I'm doing is supporting my son. He's trying to get her against me and against her brother. He told her that he has always wanted to tell them the truth, but I didn't allow it, since it would make me look bad. That's obviously a lie, but Emily believed him. When she came back home, she started arguing with me about why I never told her the truth. She called me a lying bitch. I tried to explain to her the truth and what her dad is trying to do. She told me she never wants to see me again and such. I got sick of that and grounded her and took her phone and sent her to her room. This morning, she wasn't talking to me. All she told me is that she hates me and will try to leave to live with her dad. My coworker thinks I was an a-hole for grounding her. She's a confused teenager. I don't know what to believe, really. So I'd like to read some outsider perspectives, please. Edit. Our oldest son, 15, came out as trans. His dad isn't supportive at all. Quite the opposite. That's why we're getting divorced. He's trying to get Emily against her brother. Edit again. Emily is not a product of an affair. I got pregnant with her after both of our divorces were over. Just to provide some information on that from the OP in the comments. Since it's a different language than English, they didn't know the word conceive.
Okay. This is a spicy meatball. Okay, let's get all the facts straight, because this one's intricate. We'll start from the very beginning of this tale. She openly admits to us that she had an affair.
Correct.
With someone that her ex-husband was working with, co-worker. And now her and that co-worker are getting a divorce.
Correct. After they had 3 kids.
Yes. Now, she outlines it. They had an affair, but the child was not conceived before she was divorced.
Correct. It was after.
Fair enough. She says that her daughter really likes her father. She probably has a close relationship. She's bothered by this, clearly, to the point where she says in her story that the only reason why she even allows the daughter to go to the father is because it's court mandated.
Correct.
That's a real issue. That tells you where her mindset is, because that shouldn't have been just because the court allowed it. It should have been, that's your father. Go spend time with him too. So I think that's a really foul way to look at life when you're going out of your way to keep some kid from a parent. So there are issues I understand, because at the very end she throws the character thing in there about the father. And that's very important. So I would understand to the extent of, and she says it, this is why we're getting divorced. Because it sounds like he has a very close mind to all of things that are going on. She doesn't want that in her house. And so now she's saying that her 15-year-old has come out as trans. And that the father in this situation is not okay with any of that. So they can't agree on this. And this is something they're splitting over. Now, the father goes and tells the daughter how everything came to be. I'm guessing that's probably more his get back to, because they sound like they're very bad for each other. This divorce is really
showing real colors between both sides.
You know, they call them ugly divorces. This sounds like this is turning into that. They've lost respect for each other, and now they're using the kids as a battleground. And that's not healthy, because all you're going to end up doing is having a lot of resentment at the end of the day on both sides. I guess in my viewpoint, they're both the a-hole. They're both putting their kids right in the smack center of this divorce. And I don't really care so much for the mom or their dad, because they both sound like they're pieces of work in their own ways.
So let me go ahead and give you a breakdown of the consensus and what moderators say.
Let's hear this.
So the moderators put down a-hole for this thread.
Okay.
And I get that. If you're talking about her question, is she an a-hole for grounding her daughter for calling her a liar? Yeah, she's the a-hole. She lied about this, tried to hide it, and then it doesn't sound like she tried to sit down with her daughter and tell her how everything came to be from her perspective.
Which she probably should have.
More like her daughter came back, she was upset about what she heard. You would hope that your parents would meet in a most romantic way, you know, but you find out that the only reason why their relationship came to be is because they cheated.
It would just, again, it's interesting that the father chose this time to go ahead and nuke the family.
I think the only reason why that's happening is probably because of the disagreement that they have regarding the son.
Oh, definitely. 100%.
Which, on the other hand, is why the consensus throughout all the commenters is everyone sucks here.
You really do have to take this beyond what the question was.
Correct.
And I think that's where maybe the narrators in this situation, they did go by the letter of the law.
They went by
this
the
was the
actual
question you asked. This
Correct.
is what we see.
But
this is a big story.
The commenters actually put down everyone sucks here.
Yeah.
I think it's hard because both sides are trying to play this game with their kids in the middle because they don't agree.
That's where it comes back down to. They're weaponizing the kids.
And that's why I also agree with the real consensus that everyone sucks here. Well, that was a bit of a hot mess.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and go to our last story. And let's try and uplift ourselves with a celebration of joining families.
All right.
For our last story. Am I the a-hole for not letting my sister use the family property for her upcoming wedding? I am 25. My sister is 29. I also have a younger sister, 8. When I was 14, my mom sent me to live with her parents. Her excuse was that they needed me to help out. I believe she just didn't want to deal with a growing male teen. My grandparents owned an amazing property in the mountains that has an amazing view. We also have some horses and other critters. They were also quite wealthy as well. They both passed 4 years ago, a month apart. They gave me the property because I would appreciate it and respect it more, while my mom and sisters got money and other assets overall valued more than the property. In the past 4 years, I turned part of the property into a venue for mainly weddings. Grandparents knew of this idea and thought it was a good one. We are busy and usually booked about 8 months out. My sister got engaged 1.5 years ago and said she wanted to get married at the property. I said yes, just let me know the date as soon as possible so I can make sure it's booked. I never got a date. I followed up several times and kept asking her, and she would brush me off. 2 weeks ago, I got the wedding invitation stating the property is the location and the date, which is in September of this year. I immediately called her to say that we have booked for that date and can't accommodate her. Well, now her, my mom, other family, her partner's family, as well as other flying monkeys have been blowing up on me. They are also calling and writing reviews for my business. I asked them to stop and call my sister, telling her that literally all she had to do was tell me when she knew her date was so I could block it and would take care of everything else. She went off on how I am ruining her day. It is our family's property. How she already sent out the invitations and couldn't go back now. I should just tell the other couple to cancel. They had been on the books for over a year now, and I actually like them. Family is more important. After the last big blow up, I started communicating strictly through the business, using our recorded line as well as email. I suggested 3 other dates around the same time, but that's not good enough. I'm being resentful and an a-hole. Am I the a-hole?
'Tis peak, my lord. This is a terrible story.
Just a little.
Wow. Let's go on the journey. You lied to me.
I said there was a celebration.
Yeah, I was like, oh, this is going to be cute. No. So, ROP sounds like a good person. Mother sounds like trash. Sent him off to live with the grandparents because, in his words, didn't want to deal with a growing male. I can understand why that would hurt. At 14, lucky for him, his grandparents sound like good people that got to raise him right at the end. Unfortunately, they passed 4 years ago, so I'm sorry to hear that. But it sounds like they saw in you something pretty amazing because they left you with the most important thing, money you can get. Money can be lost and earned any day. Property, that's something you trust someone that's going to treat it the way you did.
And a potential business venue, which is amazing because they taught him how to fish.
Yes, and they approved of the idea. So, unfortunately, they pass. He takes over. He turns it into the wedding venue that he's talking about, and it sounds like it's profitable. He says it. 8 months this thing is booked out. That's crazy. Good for you, man. Now, let's get into his very entitled family. It is not their home. It is his property, not theirs. But for some reason, they all believe that because their grandparents owned it, that everyone has a say in what happens on this property. Absolutely not. That is why his grandparents entrusted him with that, because they probably knew exactly what all, in his words, these flying monkeys were about. So good for them for assessing the rest of their family. The sister in this situation, because he outlines it very clearly. Pick a day. I will make it work. How fantastic is that? Because wedding venues are expensive.
Oh, yes.
How amazing is that you have a brother that says, shoot, and whenever you're ready, I'll make it happen.
Just make sure. Give it to me as soon as possible.
That's fantastic. She doesn't do the bare minimum. She sends a wedding invitation out with the date and the place, and said nothing to him about it, even though I'm almost certain she knows that property is also being used as a wedding venue.
Oh,
I'm
yes.
almost certain they would know that about him. So she sends this wedding invitation, and he goes, hold on, that's for this address, and you've never told me anything about this. How insane is that for you to do? And then could you imagine the OP's heart start thumping as he's opening this wedding invitation and realize it's his address? And he knows nothing about this, especially after he's tried to be accommodating towards them. But after he lets them know that that's not possible because you didn't give me enough time to work with anything, they're unwilling to move their date or do anything because the invitations have already been sent. Okay, and if you really want that venue, pick a date that works for everyone. Your brother in this situation, because for them it's almost like, well, we're family, get rid of them. What? It's a business. It doesn't work like that. And then they got the entire family to start parading around like the clowns they are to try to make this kid feel bad. What? Y'all are different.
I would just like to add, they reviewed his business badly.
That's right. I didn't even cover that. That's so heinous. Could you imagine your family not getting what they wanted because they were being irresponsible?
And then trying to hurt your livelihood and the livelihood of your employees.
And burn it all down because of a date that you're not willing to change or work with him on. He sounds like a good person. Even if it wasn't free, regardless, he sounds like a good person, and you just expected him to just kind of roll over and step on other people when he has this is his livelihood we're talking about. OP, you are not the a-hole. You sound like you have a good head on your shoulders. There was a reason why that property was imparted to you by your grandparents. So keep being you and don't let your terrible family, all of the monkeys flying around in the circus, affect you.
Well, the consensus is that our poster is not the a-hole. In fact, we have some edited to ads that they added to his post. So let me go ahead and read that.
Come on, good.
The first edited to ad. Thank you all for the overwhelming response. I thought I was going crazy. I'll try to respond to people later when I have some time. Thank you for all the advice and responses. Edited to ad 2. Wow. There is no possible way I can respond to everyone. I have been taking notes about what people are saying and will go through the process as I have time. Most likely Monday. I plan on getting in contact with a couple and see if I can take them to dinner or something to explain the situation. I'm thinking of giving them a discount, getting a guest list, and being tight on security on our part. Thanks, everyone. Edited to add 3. I'm so blown away by the responses. The coming weeks are going to be busy. I probably won't update until most of everything is settled, but I am going to reach out to the other couple, have a sit down with my sister as well as my mom. I have a meeting with a lawyer later this week. And finally, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to name my business for reasons. Thanks for the offers of writing good reviews, but I can't accept it. I like to earn everything I have or am given. I have made a lot of contacts in this business and am now having to call on them to help me out. Just do me a favor. Be kind to everyone. Show love, compassion, and respect.
Attaboy. Good story. Fantastic ending. All right, that's great. Good for him.
Hopefully he figures that situation out, and I hope that he sticks to his guns. A wrong thing is wrong and should never be okay.
Yep. Yeah, that was a good way to end Wednesday. Good. You may have started that thing and it was one thing, but it ended up being amazing.
I told you there to be a little celebration.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Good for him. Well, as our stories come to a close, don't forget, you see in the world what you carry in your heart.
If you have enjoyed listening to us read and talk about today's stories, please rate, subscribe, and turn on notifications for new content. We are regularly posting on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We would also love to hear your comments on if you would leave in the middle of dinner to go ahead and accommodate your 5-year-old, or if you would just sit the course.
I'm eating the McDonald's with a kid in the car. And remember, if you post it, maybe we'll see it on the internet.